We're back at Granite City Comic Con. Early. Good early start on the day. I have the absolute pleasure of being here with Alan Grant.
Thank you.
I cannot say how excited I was to actually have you here for this. I know you probably get this a lot, but and how was the travel here? You said you traveled quite well to get here.
Yeah, it was a 5-hour drive, but it was okay.
It was okay.
Sunny
Scenic.
most of the way. Yeah.
Sunny most of the way, which is more than we generally get.
It's a long time since I've been to Aberdeen. It must be about 15, 20 years.
Yeah. Well, since you've been to Aberdeen at all,
yeah.
You were saying was that probably the last?
It's too
convention?
cold up here.
True, actually. Yeah. It's every time I'm shaking someone's hands, they're telling me my hands are too cold, and it's just because we're climatized. But no, we were just saying how impressed we are by the turnout here.
It's absolutely fantastic.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I know exactly, especially since Chris and Colin, and Morgan, guys who planned this, they don't deserve, they deserve so much credit for what they've actually done, especially with the fact that they've essentially done this in about a year. It's been a year solid planning, and to get this turnout is just.
Yeah, they said they were expecting about 500 people, but I think there's about 5,000.
Well, there's if you count the entire line, which is just going down the road, then yeah, just down at the beachfront, which, as you said, in Aberdeen is not the most exotic beachfront. But yeah, I was going to say as well, it's one of the running themes where we talked to Chris and Colin before this, and one of the sort of running themes of this has been the small press side of things, and it's great to just see such a massive crowd of people around that. But as well as that, you're doing something with Blackheart Press right now as well.
Yeah.
I was going to say Rom of the Reds, which is a great place to have it called Rom of the Reds. I was going to say, just the fact that it's we're this close to Pittodrie, but I was going to say. The fact that I was going to say that I've been hearing quite a lot about that, and a lot about the small press projects that a lot of people have as well. And right now, particularly, it seems like a great time to be developing for small press.
I think computers have made all that possible. You know, it's like people can do it for themselves now instead of having to depend on the big companies to do it for them.
Yeah, exactly. Is it something? Is it maybe not that you prefer, but is it something? Is it refreshing to just go and do your own sort of thing over maybe working for these bigger?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always worked for the small press where I could, but obviously the money comes from the big companies. Yeah. But if you have a small independent hit, you can do very well out of it. So we've got high hopes for Rom of the Reds. Yeah,
I was going to say it's very. I looked. I remember. I've seen the art. The opening. The
art's
first
lovely.
It's amazing.
It is.
And I know you probably it's all you always hear about your stuff on 2000 AD, but it does have that tone to it.
Yep.
I was going to say there's a very there's a tone that you generally have where you can have this sort of. It's essentially the first page is a planet just dying, but then the whole thing essentially comes down to what it is, and it's that almost tongue-in-cheek tone. Like I remember reading a story. I'm sure it was one of the stories you did, She Devils, for Judge Dredd, and there's some really dark, ominous stuff, but the dialogue will there's points where you expect it to be really dark, and then the tone will just completely change, and it's just this woman's just had like an uncle crushed to death, and then in the next shot it'll be, you almost cost us this 5 more years, and she's like, I just lost my uncle, you rat. And then I remember the next quote was something like, and he's the best. And it's that kind of tone that I think is great. But like I said, you've said, it's as good a time as any to create their own stuff. Is there any advice you'd give to young sort of creators or any age now, to be honest?
The only thing I can say is keep at it. When I first tried to start my career writing comics, I was about 19 or 20. And I was working for DC Thompson in Dundee at the time. Yeah. And I had a chat with one of the editors of one of the boys' comics. And he was very encouraging. So I went away and I wrote the story that we'd been talking about. I didn't have the courage to hand it over personally, so I left it on his desk. Didn't hear anything for about 2 weeks. And I came in one morning and there on my desk was a standard rejection letter. Dear sir, DC Thompson regrets that your story is of no interest to them. And I thought, well, he's like 4 doors away from my office. He could have come along here and said that. But I felt really crushed by it, to be honest, because it was the first comics project I'd ever tried to do.
And you've put a lot into it.
And I had put a lot into it. So I didn't try again for about, 8 or 10 years after that. I worked in different areas of publishing. I worked for mainly romantic teenage fiction.
Well, there's a lot of money in that now. So.
Well, there was then too. It was. I was quite surprised when I did actually break into comics. I was surprised to find that the writers of romantic teenage fiction, they were allowed to keep the copyright on their work. But the people who worked in comics weren't allowed to keep the copyright. You had to sign. Every time you got a check, there was a declaration on the back of the check, which you had to sign before they would cash it.
It's a check and a contract in one.
Yeah. By signing this, I accept that I no longer own the copyright on the work that I have written.
That's heartbreaking. It's probably,
well, it was like comics was 30 years behind the whole of the rest of the publishing world.
Well, that's one of the things, at least with small press, and even in the case of, I suppose, Image as well, that the creator-owned side of things is really improving. And it's great to see that it is, that, people can have that level of control and still really have, essentially, keep their babies.
Still own their stuff, it's great, it is.
It's like I said, it's just... I think, like you said, there's no better time just with the amount of media that is available to people now. And the fact you can just communicate easily. There's no letter. There's no wait on the post time. It doesn't get lost in the post anymore.
Protection emails.
I know, exactly. Obviously, like I've mentioned before, you spent a lot of time on 2000 AD, and it's still going strong, still going fine, especially in a time where, it's with the way comics are seen now, the American sort of big companies and the fact that they're part of these big franchises now. It's still going and it's still persisting. What do you think is something to do? What do you think was the real draw of 2000 AD that still keeps it going? Is it the format?
Well, I think when it started off, I think it was the whole punk attitude if punk's the right word for it, to everything. It was an irreverent type of attitude, which I think actually you could probably trace it throughout the history of British comics. And I think that although to a certain extent 2000 AD have lost that, I think that with the number of new creators that they've got working for them, I think it's starting to come back again.
It's almost like the people who grew up on this material.
Exactly.
It comes full circle again.
Yeah.
No, I remember saying it's really hard to pin down. There is a tone to 2000 AD where you almost have this very grim, sad tone, but there's always this bit of humor that just comes into it.
Yeah.
Like there's only so long that you can mourn Judge Anderson being frozen or essentially killed when it's in a big pool of boink or something like that. Like but it's this fine line. Like the writing has always been quite interesting that sort of way. You get. And there has been a lot of creators in it as well.
Yeah, well, I think that the humour has been paramount to 2000 AD's popularity. And I think that if they can keep the humour up, also commenting on today's society, even though you're setting your stories in the future, you're in many ways making comments on today's society, which I think people find quite interesting.
Well, yeah, we've had conversations about it before. I always say that it's amazing how the comics that really stick with people aren't... It could be the most far-off topic, but then if there's something that just relates to however people behave socially, or they have these little touchstones, these sort of, common things that people can kind of find in them that make you think about, what's around you to a degree. It just makes it that much more easy, to attach these. You could even, like you've said, in 2000 AD, there's Mega City 1 seems like such a bizarre sort of future, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that are very similar with what we have now.
Yeah.
Every band that they go through is almost identical to a band that we've had at some point.
Yep.
Because what was it? You had the Smokatorium is kind of similar to what we have.
Well, it's coming about now, Smokatorium, except the outdoors is the new smokatorium.
Don't worry about the environment as long as it's not in our
as long
pubs.
as it's not inside. Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous.
Oh man. Yeah. Is there anything? I've talked at you for long enough. Is there anything? Is there any sort of? Is there anything that you're, any of your upcoming projects or anything you're planning on doing that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I'm actually working on a project which is quite close to my heart, but it's probably a long way from most comics fans' hearts because it involves no superheroes. I don't know if you ever read the Anarchy series, which I wrote.
I've read bits of the Anarchy series. Yeah,
Batman.
I remember it was only a mini series that you did for a while, and wasn't it turned into an ongoing at one point?
It was a bit
not the same.
against my advice,
yeah.
But they did it anyway.
Up in the game.
In the mini series, I made a lot of reference to this at the time, which a fairly new philosophy called neotech. Well, last year, the guy who owns Neotech got in touch with me, said he'd seen Anarchy, liked how I had used his material. He's written a trilogy of novels, which he now wants translated into or adapted into graphic novel format. So I've just finished the first of them. It's being drawn by a guy called Claude Saint-Aubin, a French-Canadian artist that I worked with a couple of years ago on the War of 1812. I don't know if you ever saw that. I don't think it got into the comic shops over here.
I was saying I've never seen that one.
No, it was a 100-page graphic novel hardback. It won the Alberta Book Prize for the best young adult book of the year last year. But I mean, it's virtually unknown in Britain. But I'm trying to get the same team that worked on that to work on this new thing. So anyway, I've written the first one. I'm working on the second graphic novel right now.
So that's amazing. That essentially was that you got interested in what he was doing, and then in turn he's got interested in what you're doing, and now you're both helping each other do something else.
And the funny thing is, I mean, he's got a massive database of customers for his Neotech philosophical material, and it doesn't cross over with comics people at all. So I doubt if this trilogy of graphic novels will ever get into the comic shops. Yeah, but it will make more money selling to his database than almost any comic. It
just shows how did
Batman.
I was going to say if you put Batman on the cover, it'll be fine. But it's really odd that thinking that how does a comic gain traction? Like you said, it can get an award, it can get money this way, but then it may not even be in a comic shop.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that Diamond distributed it in Britain at all.
It's just mad. It's so something can be a success and not even be.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just a success; it's a big success. Yeah. It's compulsory reading in Canadian schools because it's the only way they can get the kids to get interested in their history is show them it in comic form.
It's visual,
Don't tell them, don't give them books, give them comic books.
Yeah.
It's a long time since I went to school, but I was at school in Scotland in the 1950s, and I can remember quite well being belted. I don't think people get the belt at school anymore.
No, my dad tells me a lot about it, so it's fine.
Only verbally.
I was belted for taking a Beano into my primary school class and reading it in there. And now I have head teachers phoning me up saying, would you come and give a chat to our primary 5, 6 and 7 pupils?
Script's been completely flipped.
Because they can't get them interested in reading. Yeah. And they figure that comics is the way to do it. And I thought, it's a nice turnaround to be belted for it 50 years ago, but now to be fated for doing it. It's great.
Just have a little internal chuckle about it. It just shows you it's bizarre thinking it's taken this long for people to really realize that comics can have that kind of benefit, that effect, because it's not passive like a film, but it's still just as visual and just as stimulating.
Well, I always say that, I always used to say, I haven't said it much recently.
You can say it now.
Comics is one of the few media which actually engages both hemispheres of the brain. You've got to use both the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain to put a comic together. Whereas if you go and watch the Avengers movie, the left half of your brain gets left at home. It's just the right half of your brain that watches it, the big explosions, the guys fighting each other. If you read a novel, the right half of your brain can go to sleep because it's just the left half that's needed for reading the novel. But with comics, you've got to use both halves of the brain. I remember I once said that on Argentinian TV. I was on the equivalent of Argentina's, I don't know what they call it because I never watched breakfast TV, but the program that's on from like 7 in the morning.
This morning, something like that.
This morning, yeah. And I happened to mention this hemispheres of the brain idea. And the presenter just looked at me and said, "Are you crazy?"
Oh, okay. All right, I'm sorry I cut you short there.
Okay.
But thank you for giving us that, especially on that final note. It just got very deep. But thank you very much for giving us your time. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.